Hello, everybody. I'm Leslie Jane Seymour, and I'm the founder of Covey Club, and I want to welcome you all here tonight to talk about how to be a killer presenter. And we're going to add humor to everything you do. We just had a humorous moment there where, for some reason, the machine decided that I was not the owner of this recording. So anyway, we're thrilled to have you all here, and we've got a great evening for you. And we have Lynn Harris, who's brilliant, and Robin Hatcher, who's brilliant. And I just want to tell you all, for those of you who don't know how to operate this, you have a mute button down on your left-hand corner, and you should mute yourself if you're not talking. You're welcome to ask questions at any point and stop us in the presentations or the discussion or whatever. Please add your questions because it's really about you. It's not about us. And we want to make sure that you get something great out of this time that you're spending with us because you have many other things to do, obviously. And we are recording this, and then what we do is we put it back out there for the people who couldn't get here, who are in the Nest area and in the Leslie's List area of the club. And I hope you'll come to more of these because I think they're really valuable. And if you have any ideas of more of these kinds of topics and things that would be of interest to people, I would love to have you send me an email, or you can put it into the chat area. If you look to your right of your share screen, you can see a little chat bubble, and you simply click on that and you'll get a little chat screen and you can ask questions directly. I'm happy to ask questions for you if you're all too shy to ask them. I don't see anybody very shy here, so I don't think we're going to have that problem tonight. But if you have a question, raise your hand or unmute yourself so that we know that you want to do it. That would be great. Anyway, so I'm going to introduce you to our hostesses tonight. So we have Robin Hatcher, who's a speaker, a coach, and author of Standing Ovation Presentations, and Lynn Harris, who's founder of Gold Comedy. And I'm really just psyched because one of the things that I think is just terrible about what's going on now, especially in corporate life, is all this presenting we have to do and all of this. I mean, how many times do I cringe when certain people get up to make a presentation? It's just dreadful and awful and terrible. And how do you make it better? And I think always humor is a great thing to do. And of course, Robin, I've known for a long time, and she knows everything about speaking. And then when I ran into Lynn, I said to her, oh my God, can you teach us how to make presentations funnier so that people will actually want to come see your presentation? So I'm going to start with, and Robin, you can also pop in if you have answers to any of these questions, and then we'll go back and forth and a little bit, and then we'll throw it out to you guys for questions that you have. But again, feel free just to raise your hand or say I have a question or whatever. So Lynn, I thought we'd start with you and ask, how can a leader command a room or change the conversation with a funny retort? That is, to me, one of the strongest uses of humor, I think, when things are bad or when things are not going your way or you have to get out of a tight situation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really a tricky one because humor is challenging. Humor can be challenging for women at work to begin with, not because we aren't hilarious, but because if much as with humor on stage, if rando white guy gets on stage and bombs, or one joke fails, he moves on, and he had a moment of that guy right then, that guy Bruce, not being funny, right? But if a woman is on stage in a lineup of all dudes and she tells one joke that bombs or has a bad set, then women aren't funny.
Oh, interesting.
As far as the audience is concerned. So it's tricky on a good day in the office for women to be funny. And by the way, spoiler, it's not that we absolutely recommend it. We're just acknowledging that and there's ways that using humor on a good day and a bad day can build your leadership and build your authority and your success in the office. But we're also acknowledging that the encouragement and recommendations that might apply to dudes doesn't always immediately automatically apply to women, because there can be, depending on the situation in the office, more at stake.
Wow, interesting.
So yeah, so so in terms of getting out of a jam, a lot of it depends on all of humor. Really depends, not all, almost all of humor depends on reading the room. So I've heard of these days recently, I've heard of situations where, and this has happened a million times, women have been, a woman who's the only woman in the room, who is definitely not the lowest ranking, as it were, a person in the room, has been asked to take notes.
Oh God, okay.
And
how do you get out of that in a humorous way?
Right. So so that's tricky, right? So you're not the boss. You're outnumbered. And you also don't want to cause more problems. You need to just get out of the situation as opposed to engaging. So I've heard this, I keep hearing this story happen, which is kind of crazy, but I keep hearing that situation happen, but one thing to do is a way that kind of disengages rather than provokes is to say something like, I'm sorry, I thought you just asked me to take notes. I must be hearing wrong, or something like that, where you're being a little bit obvious and a little bit clear, but voicing your incredulity without actually saying, are you kidding me? And it's not hilarious.
Right.
It's not an actual joke, but right. It's a way of kind of lightening a situation without losing your authority or making your point.
Yeah. Robin, do you?
I was wondering, Lynn, when you were, because my thing is, as soon as I hear something, and not only do I do presentations, I do a lot of communication training. So as soon as I hear a problem like that, I try to think of like, what are some other ways? So one of the things that I thought of would be, I'm wondering if you could say something like, contrary to popular belief, all women don't have fail-safe minds or don't have good handwriting, or to say so-and-so has much better handwriting than I do. It's like to really, so making it light, but not, it's a similar thing. But yeah. What you're doing is actually saying, you're calling out the fact that there is a discrepancy and I am the only woman in the room. So.
Right, you're saying women, you're referring to women, so you're referencing it.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
It's, as with so many things like that, it's so important to read the room.
Yeah.
If someone asks you to do that, and you kind of sense that the other people at the table are like, murmur, that feels inappropriate, then you have more leeway than right. If someone asks you to take notes and literally everyone's like, yeah, why doesn't she take notes? Like, you can tell if the vibe is on, if the crowd, so to speak, is on your side or not. And yeah. Then you can make a quick judgment as to how aggressive or passive aggressive you want your response to be.
Yeah.
Robin, when you are presenting, there are some people who think you should automatically open with a joke, or when you're giving a speech, or it should, unless you're giving a very serious, really.
Yeah. The funny thing is, it's like, it's not about the joke. And that is like, there's a list of 5 openings that you'll probably find in most books, and what most presentation skills tell you, teachers tell you to do. One of them is usually humor. I've left it out of my book, and I've left it out of my, when I teach, because people's senses of humor are so completely different. And just like Lynn is talking about reading a room, you're going into a room cold. You don't know if their sense of humor is your sense of humor. You don't know if they even have a sense of humor. And so the thing is, like, most of the time when you're thinking about humor away from that room, you're going to think of something that makes you laugh, or you're going to think of something that makes maybe a comedian would use to make it laugh. That necessarily is not going to work in that room. That doesn't mean that you can't be humorous. One of the most important things about starting a presentation is to catch them off guard. The thing that I hate, you were talking about boring presentations and all of that. The thing that I hate the most is the predictable opening,
Yeah.
hi, I'm here to talk to you about. So, but then people have somehow misinterpreted the fact that then that means that you have to use a joke, but you don't. You know,
What
so
are some
like,
other good openings that are alternatives that
yeah,
are?
the alternative openings would be questions. Of course, that you hear that all the time, and everybody does that. How many of you is a great opening, because what that does is it jumps people out of their comfort zone. Most people, especially in business offices, are expecting you to come in and say, hi, my name is Robin, and we're here to talk about. So they're on their phones, they're talking to their neighbors, they're looking at the handouts. But if you stand up there and you say, hi, how many of you this? Or you start with a quotation. One of my favorite quotations, sometimes I'll start off and I'll just say, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, what you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say. I'm here to help make sure that what you say gets heard. You know, so that's another way. And another way is sometimes you can just start with a story. You know, you can start with, in the example that I give for a story for myself would be if I were doing this, excuse me, 1 second.
Is that you?
Ken.
I'm like, who's banging around? I look to see if everybody has their mute on, and they
I
do.
know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, it's,
There you go.
you're natural. My husband is a great cook and he's like cooking dinner, but the thing is the kitchen is right by here and it's like,
But we
so
like that. The fact that he's even cooking dinner makes
I
it.
know, I think it's wonderful. And so like, I think,
all of us.
I know, I may just have to say, you guys have to suck it up because we got to eat, but
Right.
so so you've got the story. So sometimes like most people know, like if you know me, you've heard my story that my literal nickname growing up was Shy. So sometimes I might even just start with that. Growing up, my nickname was Shy, and here I am. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Teaching presentation skills. Isn't that crazy? Is that wacky? That's one of the things that you do, or a statistic. Especially like with what Kelly is talking about, like a strong, powerful statistic is going to get their brains moving in another way. So
Right.
it's like you can get that humor. And now what I do when I start a lot of my presentations is I play music and I dance. So it's like, it's not a joke, but the song
That would
is
be a
usually,
joke for me.
huh? Yeah, me too,
Everybody
because I
clear
can't
the
sing.
room if I did that.
But it's like, so sometimes I'll play Express Yourself because I'm talking about expressing yourself. If I'm doing branding, I'll play Who Are You by The Who. So it's something that whatever, like opening with something that's going to make the listener's brain shake up.
Okay.
And if you're funny, you can make it humor. If you're not, there are other ways.
Yeah. I can add one other suggestion, which is, you're totally right that it's hard to, first of all, whatever you do, don't Google good jokes to open presentations with, because you will find a lot, and they're all completely disembodied, random jokes that have nothing to do with anybody or anyone, and they are made of fail. But what you can do, since you don't know much anyway about the people in the room,
Right.
think about what you do have in common. And to me, that's kind of the whole point of humor in a workplace setting anyway, which is to actually remind people what you do have in common. And so, for example, if there's something peculiar about the room, if the Danish on the table that you all just ate were like literally the most delicious Danish, or if parking was tough, or if there's like a national conversation that everybody is having and everyone's distracted by, like there's always something you can make a reference to, hi, I'm Lynn Harris, and today we are going to talk about literally nothing except Omarosa, or something, where it's not, you don't have to know anything about them, and it actually kind of humanizes you because they know right then that you're not just going to give them, speech number 3 that they could be giving in any other room. You're at least noticing where you are, where you're all sitting, what everyone might be thinking about. Is everyone cold? Is everyone hot? Is it, and that kind of helps, kind of wrap a thread around everybody also.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to do those impromptu, though. That's not the
Yeah.
kind of thing that you can sit there and write a little thing right before. If you're a nervous kind of person, that's not going to work for you, right?
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a joke though. You could just be like, just be like
Observation.
Robin's idea of asking a question like, okay, show of hands, how many people just ate 12 danishes?
Right.
Okay, just me. Like, or how many people, like, or just like, how good is this coffee? Or just anything that's just not like set up punchline, but just kind of a not really a fully formed joke, but just a bit of banter.
Yeah. I mean, because the bottom line about humor and any kind of engagement in a presentation is being present. And someone just pointed out recently how like present is actually part of presentation and we forget about it. It's like,
Right.
we have to be present. And so many times, like there is going to be that impromptu moment and we need to be aware and ready to seize it. And if you're not present, you can't be.
And what mistakes, what are the big potholes for women in humor? I mean, obviously the you don't want to make fun of yourself. That's a very common thing that women do. I know in stand up, that was one of the big discussions was women always do use self-deprecating humor. Is that a no-no if you're in making any kind of presentation, or is it okay? Or does it, again, it depends on where you are and who you're giving the talk to?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, we just heard how lovely Robin's opener was about saying that she used to be shy, right? And that, I think there's self-deprecation and self-deprecation. Usually when, in my observation, when women use it in stand-up, they're actually just reclaiming, they're kind of doubling down on what their perceived flaws or challenges might be, and then turning them into an act that literally everyone's listening to, and they're the only ones with the mic and they're controlling the punchline. So, it's I don't know if it's inherently a problem I don't think it's I think it's perfectly great for women on stage because I don't think it's actually ultimately self-deprecating. At work though, that is one case where I don't know if it carries over unless you have a very clear and specific context and intent, as Robin did.
Yeah.
Or if it's, I guess if it's about something that's not work related, being a terrible skier, whatever. But in general, I think the best thing personal wisecracks tend to be funny because they tend to be sort of come from an authentic place. I still go back to the idea that that comedy in the workplace is best deployed as a way for people to kind of experience what they have in common. So any joke that kind of takes people out of that is going to be less effective, whether it's disparaging another group, disparaging yourself in such a way that plays into even inadvertently plays into a stereotype, allows people to other you. Those are the ones that, like, in other words, I'm not sure if it's exactly about self-deprecation, but that self-deprecation for women can be one example of kind of setting people apart as opposed to bringing them together.
Does anybody who's joined us have any questions to start with for Robin and Lynn about how to use humor? Does somebody have a question?
I do.
Go for it.
When you're doing a presentation and you're working a crowd or do you gauge how people are responding to you in terms of humor? Is that how you do it? Are you kind of looking out at the crowd or looking out at the folks that you're presenting to? And is that where you realize, okay, I need to add some humor. I need to be lighter. I need to make this presentation a little bit different. Do you wing it? Do you gauge the room that you're working?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It is about working and understanding the room. It's like I remember a long time ago, I got the best compliment and I didn't even realize. And at the end of the presentation, this woman said, it's like, you had an intuitive knowledge of when to shift the energy based on what was happening in the room. So it really does become, it's like you do get that feeling of heaviness. And when you get that feeling of heaviness, how can you lighten it up? And I like the word light because humor is about lightening, making things lighter. Like things that are heavy, you just want to make them lighter. And so if you see a lot of people just feeling heavy, that's when I will find something to be lighter. And it's not going to be a joke. Sometimes it's, and I love this whole idea about self-deprecating, and there's so many degrees of it. You know, it's like, because in the workplace, you can't, like Lynn said, you can't self-deprecate about something that is related to work, because then people are going to take it, oh yeah, she's right, she really does stink at that, you know. But if it's related to if it's related to something completely different, you know, I can say, you know, I'm a terrible cook, and that's a whole different thing, because that has nothing to do with that. But as far as lighting, some changing that energy and feeling that energy, and the worst thing though, it's the same thing as like one-on-one conversation. You don't want to see the energy down and then make a joke, because that could just be dead. So what I tend to do is, like, when you see energy down, is I get them involved in something else. You know, I get them involved, because the whole point of when you're speaking is to give something to your audience and to have the audience take something back. You know, so it's like, it's all really about them. And so how can, and when I get it in those moods, when I see things heavy, it's like, how can I make it about them again, and be really authentic about it.
Robbie, can you give an example of that? It's Kelly.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah. So what I'll do sometimes, if things are kind of heavy, I will do a pair exercise. Turn to your partner and talk to them about X, Y, or Z, or talk about this, or I'll ask another question and have it be that, or I'll bring somebody into the front of the room to do a demonstration. So it's little activities that, and what sometimes it's called is changing the state. You know, it's a state change, because everybody's in the same state. And what you want to do is somehow change that physical state, which is like people talking to each other, or people standing up, or people turning to each other and saying something, well, tell your partner how great they are, or read somebody, you know, something like that, that's going to lighten things up again. Or I'll make a joke about things being heavy, you know. So
Yeah.
like, whoa, what just happened here, you know? And that
I have an example of that, which is, this is slightly different, because Robin, you just gave a bunch of great examples of sensing a mood in the moment and figuring out a way to lighten it. So this is not quite that. This is planned, but I have a good friend and colleague named Jen Posner, who gets all the credit for this, who does a lot of media trainings and presentation, media criticism and trainings and presentations about really dark stuff, violence against women, portrayals of violence, relentless, graphic portrayals of violence and assault on television. I mean, just her presentations really are just she's delightful, but they can get heavy. So one of her signature moves is that at a strategic point in her PowerPoint, she literally just switches the slide to a cat hanging from a clothesline in underpants. And you know, it doesn't make light of everything she's just talked about. She didn't just undermine the gravity of what she's been talking about. In fact, she's acknowledging the gravity of what she's talking about, but she's like, I just thought we needed a cat in underpants break. Okay, everybody breathe for a second. Okay, we're moving on. So she puts that in ahead of time, but it works every time.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
funny in an appropriate way.
Yeah. I have a slide.
Else?
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions at this point that you'd like to have answered? Snowden, did you have a question there? Nope. Okay. Anything else, Robin, did you want to add to that?
No, I wanted to show this slide that I use sometimes.
Oh, good.
You know, it's like, so it's like when people,
you do it. Okay.
Yeah. You know, it's like, because I'm talking about assertiveness, and like sometimes you get really boring. It's like the assertiveness, and then I do this. It's like, be assertive but not aggressive. And then I don't point out what I did with the color, because then I don't want to curse in the middle of a presentation. But what that does is like, oh, people will laugh, and you've got the animals and all that.
Oh, you were talking about the ASS?
Yes. Because then I will say there's an asset in being assertive,
Oh,
but not in being aggressive.
I think cursing is really good.
I know.
yeah, what about that, guys? What about women in cursing? I tend to curse a lot, and I'm embarrassed by it. I'm shocked at how many people make me feel embarrassed. But when you're presenting or you have to really know your room, and you really have to know your audience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to know your room. I got in trouble once, and it came late. I don't remember where it was. It was a long time ago, for saying I was pissed off.
For pissed off?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I know.
Really?
Somebody thought it was offensive.
That's prissiness. You must have been giving a speech in a very weird place.
I don't know.
New York.
And that really pissed me off.
That really pissed me off. That was New York. Kelly, do you have any other questions or anything that you need to ask these ladies? Because I'll go on. I have plenty of questions, but I want to make sure that.
Oh, no, I just wanted an example of that one thing, but I'm good.
Okay, Tanya, anything you want to know? I don't see Tanya, but I know she's there.
There, she's muted too, and so is.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, she said she wasn't.
She wasn't what?
She wasn't feeling that great, so she wanted to be. Yeah.
Okay, so she's listening.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so even for people who are listening, you can jump in with just your voice. So one of the questions that I also had was, when does humor mess up? Have you seen it mess up? Have you messed up? And what was it?
Oh, I'm sure I've messed up. Let me.
Yeah. And did you have to like stop your presentation? Did you see it was falling flat? Did you have to come up with a different direction?
I can't remember. I mean, I know that, once again, I'll come back to the idea that humor that feels like it might be, drawing people in and creating camaraderie. If it's creating camaraderie at the expense of another group, or, it's making you different from or separate from another group, then that might get a chuckle in the moment, but it could leave a sour taste. Whether it's just like, not like those guys in accounting, which ha ha ha, but still, it could even for a male coworker, it can be snarky in the moment, but kind of build a reputation for you of snark, fairly or unfairly. And certainly that applies to, groups of people who, aren't just departments in your workplace, but, that's the real, to me, that's the workplace reason never to make jokes that could be perceived as offensive.
Right.
So
it's about bringing people together. Generally, so what you're saying is read the room, make sure that your humor is about bringing people together and finding the commonalities and joining people together. It's not about excluding. It's not about calling. You should never call attention to your failings, especially in work in general. Like you said, that they might be like, oh yeah, she does suck at accounting.
Right. At no one's expense, including your own. I think the one example, and this goes back to reading the room. I think the one counter example would be like, legit, you could make fun of the competition. Like if you work at Coke, you can make fun of Pepsi. I mean, that's camaraderie. That's, no feelings will be hurt.
Okay.
I heard a horrible, horrible story today. I was just listening to a podcast from a fellow speaker, and he was a comedian, a comic, and he was speaking at this big synagogue, and the rabbi introduced him and gave him a really dry introduction. So he walked on stage, shook the rabbi's hand, and said, "I think you should take my class."
Oh,
Which
yeah.
was like, oh, you realize it was like,
Ouch.
no.
Oh my God.
So it's like, really, really, I mean, he learned a lot from that, but you really have to be careful about who to insult. I mean, it's like some people, it could be humor, but other people can take it quite the wrong way.
Yeah.
What's the difference, guys, between I mean, and here's probably the line for women is, how do you not be considered bitchy? Because people will think that humor sometimes from women is bitchy, or flippant. How do you get around that kind of, is bitchy only at the expense of others? But I mean, like you were saying with the competition, if you're tearing down the competition, and you're a female, aren't you risking the chance that you'll be called bitchy, where a guy would never be called bitchy for that?
I mean, there's a wide range. There's a wide range between, kind of offhand wisecracks that people sort of have a quick bonding chuckle over, and like relentless carping. And I think, as long as it's, as long as it goes to sort of a shared positive experience as opposed to shared relentless criticism.
And I feel like the timing is really important in the amount of it. It's like you can get away with one wisecrack, you can get away with one negative thing. When you start going into 2 and 3, then it starts to have that other icky feeling that happens, and I've experienced that before, especially with negativity. You can say something funny about the competition, then you say something funny, negative about something else. And then by the third one, you've become a negative person, and it is not funny. I mean, even though what it could be funny in other circumstances, then all of a sudden the finger starts pointing at you. Oh, you're a negative person. I'm not. And then I don't trust you, because what are you going to say about me when I leave the room? So that's the danger there. And for women, it's like that wittiness that you're talking about and that wryness. I feel like what happens a lot is that we get into these patterns, and some women do have that really great dry sense of humor. But if you deploy that all the time, then it can often become a defense mechanism.
It's seen as a defense,
to
right?
Seen as a defense mechanism that keeps you from being vulnerable and authentic. And when we start losing our vulnerability, we are not seen or appreciated in the way that we should be appreciated. And I feel like some people use humor as a defense. And
Right.
because we're so used to getting the laugh, and that's what we're going for. We're going for the laugh. And so then it becomes inappropriate, because at certain points, it's not an appropriate time to laugh, or it's not an appropriate time to be wry, but you're so tied to the effect and
Right.
the benefit and the accolades that you get from the laughter that you keep going.
Uh-huh. So Snowden is asking here, how do you handle hecklers without being perceived as bitchy, which is a really good question.
I just had I had that example. I was speaking at a conference in New Orleans, and there was this woman who, and she wasn't exactly a heckler, but she was one of those people that had to ask a question about everything. And it was like I would get 5 minutes of material out, and then she would say, and it was all negative about because I was talking about communication and getting and managing difficult conversations. So she would then start talking about her situation at work, and then she would do it again, and then she would do it again. And then finally, I said something like, can we hold this or whatever? And then she did it again.
Oh my God.
And I said, a friend of mine imitated me. I said, clearly, there's a reason why you're in this workshop. And I really would love for you to take the time to listen to what I'm saying, so that these won't happen again. And I said it really, and for some reason I can get away with crap like that, and nobody, it's like, and everybody was like, okay, and they laughed because they needed that to happen. Do you know that she did it again?
Oh.
And then I turned to her and I said, girlfriend, we're gonna have to talk.
But after this.
And that was it.
Oh my Lord.
Wow.
That's tough.
Yeah. So, but that's an extreme way. But usually what what I recommend people to do is to just say, can we take this offline?
Okay.
Or I appreciate your feelings. That's a really interesting point. And I will talk to you that about you last. And then there are subtler ways. The other ways is like really stare at them. You know, just walk really up to them and just look at them. Because usually it's like that same bully mentality. It's like they're doing it because they think they're not going to be seen. And
now, if you're preparing for a big speech, Robin, because you do this a lot of times, I mean, does adding humor to it in any way, does that help you as a presenter? I mean, does it help you feel more confident? I know you have a lot to say about preparing big speeches, preparing yourself for, you know, the speech of your lifetime, all that kind of stuff. Does that help you in any way, or does it make it worse because you're afraid of how to deliver it?
yeah, I never even think about adding humor. I mean, I feel like I'm
you guys were the perfect marriage then for this event.
I know. It's like, I feel like humor comes out of me. Funniness, humor, I never think about being funny. Humor comes out of me naturally if it comes out. But if I thought about it, I would be freaked out to figure out how to put humor in. When I'm coaching someone, I'm very cognizant of when they need humor. And then I will, and that also is very subtle. And I just was working with somebody on her TED Talk, and when she wrote about me, she said, "You made me funny." And I'm like, wow, I don't even remember doing that, you know. But what I did was like, what I think I did, which got her laughs, was I made things light, you know. And I really think back to that as like, instead of like doing it heavy, I found the back door that brought in lightness, which then alleviated, because she had a really heavy story too, alleviated some stress, and then people could laugh, you know. So I feel like one of the best things about humor is looking at the heaviness and trying to find the lightness. And when you find that light,
maybe that's strategy for you.
Yeah.
Lynn, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the reason, you know, it is difficult to be like, okay, now I'm going to make this funny, because you can't just kind of put humor into something. You can't be like, oh, I mentioned the word lawyers, now I'll make a lawyer's joke. Everyone likes a lawyer joke. Like, it's, you know, you can't just kind of shoehorn that in there. And you'll notice when comedians do this with crowd work, and to make an imperfect, just to illustrate, this isn't what you're necessarily doing, but when a comedian is asking someone in the audience questions, they ask questions until something presents itself as potentially funny, and you don't notice the times that they don't make jokes. In other words, they'll talk to someone in the front row. Where are you from? I'm, Midtown. Oh, where do you live? Midtown. Oh yeah, how long have you lived there? Oh, 10 years. Oh yeah, what do you do? Like, they don't make jokes. They're not just like, quick, a Midtown joke. And they wait until something presents itself that reminds them of something earlier in the show, or, you know, just something comes up that is more organic. And they wait for that to happen. And the funny thing is, when they're not telling jokes, you don't notice that they're not being funny. It's just conversation. So, you know, you could resist the urge to throw. What I do sometimes when I realize that something isn't funny yet is I just kind of read it through again, and listen to what things in there remind me of. So like, just what does something to randomly remind me of when I'm reading my presentation or my whatever it is. So for example, one time I was actually preparing a presentation for a client, and it was about potential names. It was a presentation about potential names being chosen for a new product or department or something like that. I can't remember, but it was right after that big mistake at the Oscars when they said that La La Land had won the Oscar and not Moonlight. And so when I looked at this list, I was looking at all the things we didn't use, and it just reminded me, and like, you know, all of the also rants, basically, right? All of the nominees. In fact, they were nominees, right? And I was like, what is this from? Oh, the Oscars that literally just happened this week. So I threw in a random joke where of all the product names, I also just put in La La Land. And just among the other things, just total Easter egg, had no impact whatsoever. But I didn't go in there to try to put a joke in there. I just listened to what was art, what the material already there reminded me of, and then thought and followed my own train of thought. And that's how you knew it was organic. And I knew everyone would have that in common because it had just happened.
Right. I love that. It's like, and like following your own train of thought. I feel like that's where all of my jokes come from, in the middle of a presentation, but they're not planned. And it's really like that whole being present. It's like, I'll be in the middle. It's like, oh, wow. And literally something, if I'm present, if I'm not present, I'm really worried about the presentation, nothing happens. So, but if I'm really there and I'm having a great time, then it becomes like, oh, that reminds me of something else. And then it becomes funny because it's like this bizarre association that you would have never even thought about. And then I say it, and because I thought of it, people in the audience also can relate because it was such a bizarre relationship. So it's like that whole thing about paying attention to what other people find funny and paying attention to what people laugh at in you. I mean, I feel like one of the things about humor, like we need to think about, is on a daily basis, if we want to add more humor into our presentations, spend a day talking to friends and then see how often they laugh and what they're laughing at. You know, because you may be doing funny things that make people laugh, but you're not aware of them, and you would not actually then know how to put that in a presentation.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah,
can you teach somebody to be funny? I mean, you run workshops where you teach people to write jokes, right?
Yeah.
Do you have to be a funny person to put humor into a presentation, or can you be taught to do that?
I think there are people who are better at joke writing than other people, but that's different from. But also, joke writing is trainable, and being able to write a joke is different from being funny. So
Okay.
and in other words, they're related, but they're not the exact same. They're related, but they're not synonymous. So sort of like the way my dad is an incredible musician, but he can't sing, right? So he just has related skills. He just can't like make them come out of his mouth, right? He's an insane musician like that. So, but honestly, even before you get to the mechanics of writing a joke, the part that really takes practice is related to something that Robin was just saying. And really, writing jokes takes practice too. You train yourself to not even think about, everyone who's writing a joke is applying a set of rules and mechanics, but the more practice you have at it, the less you notice that you're applying them. In other words, the rule of three, right? Where the third thing is the funny thing.
So you can learn.
What's that?
You can learn that, since there are instructions.
It's rules. It's total rules. But what practice helps you with is not have to notice that you're using the rules when you're writing. You just sort of sense that, like, okay, this is going to be, the third one's going to be funny, and I'm not like, it's rule of three time. But the thing but even that comes before that you can practice, even if you're not setting out to actually produce jokes, you know, with written or performed with setups and punchlines, is related to something that Robin was just saying, which is practicing noticing, not just practicing noticing things that are potentially funny, but practicing noticing that you're noticing. Because I guarantee you're going to forget. And so, for example, you know, a funny snippets of overheard dialogue. I mean, anything like that, you will not remember. You have to practice to remember that was funny, and then write it down, or do something. But if you think you're going to use it, write it. Notice that you noticed and write it down. So, for example, if you're walking into an unfamiliar space to do a presentation, and you kind of halfway notice that it's very cold in the room, or you halfway notice, as I was saying before, that the Danish are out of this world, or you halfway notice that the hallway on the way in was solid mirrors, which is weird, or, you know, something like that. Instead of just saying to yourself, that's weird, be like, oh, that's a thing. I'm noticing that I'm noticing. Maybe that's part of my opening, not so much joke, but like funny observation, wisecrack, whatever. So the more you train yourself, whether it's, listening to asking your friends what makes them laugh about you, or training yourself to just kind of pick up on things that could be little tidbits of whatever material is appropriate for what you're going to be doing, and listening to how you respond to things, like listening to, as both Robin and I were saying, to things that things remind you of. That's where you're going to find the kind of organic and natural and non-forced and non-jokey joke opportunities for humor that everyone will come along with, because they probably noticed it too.
So one last question here, and then we're going to do our little drawing. All you guys, because it's so small, you're all going to win something, it looks like. Kelly's asking, how about the ending of a speech? Can you end on humor instead of any questions? And that's a really interesting question, because God, the only thing I always do go, any questions? Like, I'm such a
Yeah, I learned this pretty recently, like 3 years ago, but questions should never be at the end, because just like that woman who was derailing me, now if you like give all your material and then you leave questions to the end, and somebody asks this wise ass question that gets everybody all riled up and negative, that's what they remember. There's
then you got to ask another question.
Recency. Yeah. So there's recency effect, and that's what people are going to leave the room with, all that. And then it's even harder, because then are you asking another question, but it's like that awkward thing. So you want to get the questions, but you always want to have some kind of a close in addition. And that close should be like, you do the questions, then you do the summary. You summarize everything that they learn, and then you want to close. And the close can mirror your opening. So whatever your opening is, you have the closing mirror that, so that maybe if it's, the opening was about Ralph Waldo Emerson, I would then end with saying, well, now you won't be doing things that are getting in the way. It's like something like that. Or
bring it back around in a
bring
circle.
it back. You want to make a nice way to tie it up in a nice little bow.
And interesting, Snowden's saying that she finds it dissipates the content to have Q&A at the end. Oh my God, that's all we ever do.
Yeah.
And
so many people are trained to do that, and it's just.
So should you put it in the middle, or do you just say that, if you have a big, huge room, you can't ask questions in the middle of a presentation. Where would you put your questions? And then we'll go to our little drawing.
I usually take questions throughout. And so then, I'm still.
If you have a big room, if you have a giant room, you're taking questions throughout?
Yeah, and you have to be in control. That's where it becomes really difficult. Then you have to then be the one that knows, and sometimes I fail on that. So you have to then know that that's taking too much time. So can you hold your question until in the essence of time, I got to move on. So those are the kind of things that And then people are so used to questions at the end that I still will like maybe 3/4 open it up for questions, and then add something else meaty in the beginning. And sometimes it's really great to tell them that you're going to take questions. I'm almost done. Don't say I'm almost done, but I have a couple more things to give you. I'd like to take some questions now. And then they know they're trained that there's more to come. And so that it's not like, so a lot of times when it's time for questions, and I know I do it, because when people leave questions to the end and I'm really tired of hearing people's stupid questions, I will get up and leave. I go to so many, it's like, I just, tired of hearing, I'm not going to get anything out of this, so I'll leave. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen either.
Lynn, do you have anything to say about questions at the end?
I think that is brilliant. I think it's brilliant. No, never close on a question. I can't, I hadn't thought about it in that way. I came at it from experience emceeing, when if you get that crappy question, you can't close on it. You have to wait till you get to another one, but that's, and wait for a good closer, but that's a really inefficient way of doing it. So, and then you can always end on a total throwaway, like maybe your last slide is all of your social media handles. You can always put like, depending on the crowd and depending on who you are and depending on what your brand is, there's always room for total just light throwaway humor, like I keep seeing your name Snowden, and I keep thinking of Jon Snow, and from Game of Thrones. And so I keep, it's a good thought, and I just picture like Jon Snow says, "Follow me on the Twitter," like just something with a picture of it, like a throwaway thing will make everyone smile, whether it's a cat playing piano or something. That I don't know, but just your last slide could be, because that's the one that's going to be up when they're leaving. And if it's appropriate for your brand in the room, there's opportunities for a complete
I'll quickly show you my last slide because it makes people smile. And somebody sent this to me a while ago. And when it's live, this is what happens.
Yeah, perfect.
I like that.
Is it a gift?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute.
You're welcome for that setup, Robin.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we planned it.
Adorable. And by the way, that's a tool that, was that tool PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Because but it's don't be afraid of using the animate feature in PowerPoint, because you can do adorable things like that.
Yeah.
And even in the middle of a presentation.
If that was actually, somebody sent me that GIF a while back, and I just embed it in the PowerPoint.
Yeah. I think it's an underused feature.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else have any questions before we end here? And I'm trying to find Marissa. Are you there? I can't find her. So she was going to do the drawing.
I think
Yes, I'm here.
Are you there?
Yes, I have appeared.
Oh, you've appeared. I don't see you.
She was
Yes,
hiding
okay.
behind you.
Yes.
Your picture.
Oh, you're there with me?
Yes.
I can't see that. Okay.
Yep, she's
Okay.
there.
Well, I
All right.
have the mug with everyone's names in it here.
Oh, there you are. Good. Okay, Marissa. Okay. So what we have is our little giveaways at the very end. And what everybody's going to get to start with, Lynn is giving free access to her online class, How to Do Comedy. So that's everybody here. So we can give and it would be also the people who signed up, Lynn, so that we'll send you those emails. And that was worth $19, which is great. And why don't we do the drawing, Marissa, for the private hour-long consultation from Lynn, which is worth $350.
Okay. So let's see.
This is our high-tech way of doing a drawing. There's digital ways, but we figured since it's so small, the Covey Club.
I don't know if you can see about Uloma. Is that how you say it?
All right, Uloma, we didn't hear anything from her.
There.
She's on here. Are you there? We see her, but I don't hear her. Okay, we'll
Unmute yourself. I want to see you or hear you.
I'm going to unmute her.
It's so wonderful that she won.
Okay, I can't see her there, but she's on somewhere. So we will send her a note. Uloma, hopefully, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send you a little note right here to make sure you're there. It says you're on. Okay, so I'm just going to say you just won the drawing.
You just won.
I'm here.
Right, Publishers Clearinghouse. Are you there, Uloma?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. You just won. You have to say hi to Lynn. You just won her drawing.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure this out.
Oh, okay. We hear you. You just won the coaching session from Lynn Harris. So you're going to be very, very funny next time we meet you.
Where are you?
Awesome. Thank you.
Where are you, Uloma?
In Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the next drawing is for Robin's book, which is called Standing Ovation.
Can we put them together? The book and the...
Do you want to put it together? Do you
Yeah.
want? Okay. It's going to be a drawing for the book, which is Standing Ovation presentations and an hour-long coaching session from Robin, live or virtual, your choice. And that's worth $350 also.
Can't give it to Amy.
No. Okay. All right. Poor Amy loves
Or
you.
Tanya.
Okay. So if you draw Amy, you have to draw again, Marissa.
Thank you, Leslie.
Okay, so let's see.
Watch it.
Oh,
Was that Amy?
It was Amy.
yes.
Oh,
Okay.
You want me to choose someone else?
Do you seriously not want it, Amy?
No, I would rather someone else get it.
Okay.
You sure?
I'll give it to her for free.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay.
All right, one more. So do it again.
One more. Okay.
You sing
So
Shirley.
it's Kelly Holland.
Kelly, all right. Awesome. Okay. You got
Yay,
Robin on your side. So awesome, guys. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And we just really, are thrilled to have you here. I think I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot. I'm going to steal. Robin, can you share that GIF?
I don't know.
I don't know. She's like those ants who they give you the recipe, but they won't tell you this the ingredients. So your item really sucks all the time. Okay, I'm now getting the idea here.
I know.
Maybe you can share that with Kelly as part of your coaching.
Right.
And then Kelly could share it with us. Anyway.
Right. No, I can.
I want to thank all of you for coming, and I'm so thrilled to have you here. Pass the word among all your buddies to come to more of these, and I would also love to hear what other kinds of events you'd like to do, because I think they're really interesting, and I think it also kind of sets us up for what might we do if we did a big live event as well. What are the interesting things we could cover? And Robin, thank you so much, and Lynn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My lovely Marissa, thank you for finding out how to record this darn thing for once. And hope to see you guys again. And I hope any of you who are in the New York area will come to the event we have on Thursday of next week, which is the big Armani event. You can find out about it on the Covey Club page. It's where we're having makeovers with the Armani makeup artist, Tim, who's just a living doll. And we have a great goodie bag. I'm sitting here looking at it. It's got over $200 worth of products in there from them alone. And then we have boxes literally of stuff that people are bringing to it. So it's going to be really fun. So take a look and sign up if you can. And thank you guys again. I so appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay.